I never thought I would find myself in this situation, but here I am, sharing my story with strangers on the internet. My name is Jake, and not long ago, I had what I thought was a perfect life. I was married to Sarah, a woman I loved deeply. We had been together for nearly a decade, and I had always seen her as my partner in everything. Everything came crashing down when I discovered that she had been cheating on me, specifically with one of my students. I had been a high school teacher for several years, and I genuinely loved my job. The thrill of educating young minds was something I found fulfilling. Sarah, on the other hand, worked in marketing and was often busy with her deadlines. At first, I thought the distance between us was just a phase. You know how life gets. You get caught up in work, and sometimes it feels like you're walking past each other in the hallway rather than truly connecting. But then, the little signs started popping up. She began staying late at the office, and when I asked her about it, she got defensive. "You know how it is, Jake. I have a project that's due soon." Sure, I would tell myself we all have busy seasons, but it became a routine. There were times she would come home with a new dress or a fancy bag claiming it was on sale. The truth is, I didn't think anything of it initially. I trusted her perhaps too much. One evening, I decided to clear some space on my phone and stumbled upon an unknown number in Sarah's messages. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. My heart sank as I read flirty exchanges that had been going on for weeks. My mind raced. The name at the top of the messages was familiar: Mark, one of my students. I felt sick. This wasn't just some fling. It was someone I had taught, someone I'd invested my time in, someone who sat in my classroom learning from me. The next day, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The evidence of betrayal weighed on my chest like a heavy stone. I had to confront her. I decided to wait until she got home. When she walked through the door, I could see that familiar smile on her face, the one that used to make my heart skip a beat. But that day I felt nothing but rage and betrayal. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but my insides were churning. I laid it all out for her, the messages, the suspicions, everything. Her reaction was unexpected. Instead of showing any remorse, she rolled her eyes and got defensive. "Jake, you're overreacting. It's just a bit of fun. You make everything so serious." She downplayed it as if it was just harmless flirting, and my blood boiled. This was not a game. This was my marriage. I still remember the chill that ran through me as I watched her shift from defensive to dismissive. "You're always so uptight," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "You wouldn't understand the pressures I'm under." I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. How could she turn this around on me? The emotional impact of that confrontation was devastating. I felt like I was spiraling down a rabbit hole of disbelief. The shock morphed into anger, then sadness, before finally settling into a numbness that made everything seem surreal. As I paced the living room that night, I felt like a stranger in my own home. All the years we spent together felt like a lie. The betrayal cut deep. I had been a faithful husband, and yet here I was, standing in the wreckage of my marriage while she casually dismissed my feelings. I realized that my trust had been shattered irreparably. I didn't recognize the woman I had married anymore. She seemed to revel in her ability to hurt me without any remorse. In the weeks that followed, I took time to think about what I wanted. I could stay and work on our relationship, but could I ever truly trust her again? Or was it time for me to take a different path? That night was the beginning of a long journey I had never anticipated, one that would lead me to reassess my life, my career, and my future. I knew I had to make a decision that would change everything. After that fateful confrontation, I felt like I was living in a haze. The emotional fallout was overwhelming, and I spent countless nights tossing and turning, replaying every moment in my mind. The house felt empty, even though she was still there. It was like being trapped in a bad dream, and I couldn't wake up. I started noticing more changes in Sarah. She became even more distant, throwing herself into her work and social life, spending time with friends that I had never met. Whenever I tried to talk about what happened, she'd laugh it off or divert the conversation. "Can we not dwell on this all the time? It's exhausting," she would say with an eye roll that made my blood boil. It felt like a slap in the face every time she dismissed my pain. The reality of her infidelity settled in like a thick fog. I began to question everything about our life together. All the late nights she spent at work, the random texts from Mark that were crafted in a way that made them sound innocent, they all took on a new meaning. I was playing a game without knowing the rules, and I was losing. I decided that I needed to gather more evidence, not just for my own peace of mind, but also to prepare for what was coming next. I started checking her social media and discovered more than I would have liked. Pictures of her and Mark at bars, laughing, looking far too cozy for my comfort. I had to force myself to breathe through the rage that bubbled up. It was infuriating yet oddly empowering. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her walk all over me. One evening, after a particularly long day at school, I returned home early. I found Sarah in the kitchen, laughing on the phone. When she saw me, the smile dropped from her face, and the tension was palpable. I knew I had to confront her again, and I needed to do it with a plan. "Who were you just talking to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but the fire in my belly was hard to contain. "Just a friend, Jake. Why are you always so suspicious?" She fired back, her eyes narrowing. I took a deep breath. "I want the truth, Sarah. I don't think I can do this anymore if you keep lying to me." She laughed, a sharp sound that felt like nails on a chalkboard. "You're being ridiculous. I can't even have friends without you questioning me." At that moment, I realized I needed to make a choice. I could either continue down this path of heartache or I could take control of my life. I decided right then and there that I would not let this define me. I was done being the victim. The next day, I made a decision to quit my teaching job. I had always dreamed of venturing into entrepreneurship, but I had always put it off for security and stability. Now, with my world crumbling around me, I saw an opportunity to reinvent myself, and it felt liberating. I started planning out a business idea I had been toying with for years, an online educational platform aimed at helping students outside of typical classroom settings. The idea gave me a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in a long time. I threw myself into research and development, using my connections from teaching to gather insights. I invested my savings into building a website and creating content, and as the weeks went by, I felt a shift in my energy. I was focusing on myself for the first time in years, and I realized how much I had neglected my own passions. Meanwhile, Sarah didn't seem to notice the change in me, or maybe she did, and that scared her. She was still caught up in her lies, indulging in her affair while I was building a new life without her. I started to distance myself emotionally, and she felt it. The more she tried to engage with me, the more I pulled away. The confrontation we had months ago became a turning point for me. I felt stronger, more empowered. I wasn't going to be her doormat anymore. I was done being the guy who would take her back no matter what. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. We had a heated exchange one night when Sarah returned home late, smelling of perfume I didn't recognize. This time, I didn't hold back. "I know about you and Mark. This isn't working, Sarah. You need to make a choice." Her face twisted in anger, but I was ready for it. I had found my voice, and it felt good. I wasn't afraid of the confrontation anymore. I would stand my ground no matter the cost. That night, I made the decision to file for divorce. It was time to take control of my life. I was ready to step into the unknown, and more importantly, I was ready to let go. The decision to file for divorce was both a relief and a weighty burden. I felt lighter knowing I was finally taking a stand for myself, but at the same time, it was sobering to confront the reality that my marriage was over. I remember sitting in my newly organized home office, surrounded by plans for my business, and feeling a sense of empowerment wash over me. This was my moment to reclaim my life and turn the page. I initiated the divorce process with a lawyer who specialized in family law. The first meeting was surreal. As I sat across from her, I felt like I was finally doing something for myself, not just reacting to Sarah's infidelity. The lawyer asked about my assets, our living situation, and the potential custody of our dog, Max. It felt so clinical and detached, but I had to remind myself that this was the path I had chosen. I was no longer a victim. I was taking control. As soon as I filed the papers, I braced myself for the inevitable fallout. Sarah would not take this lightly, and I knew it would be a rough road ahead. I wasn't wrong. The day she found out about the filing was explosive. I was at home working on my business plan when she stormed in, her face flushed with anger. "Jake, you're seriously going through with this. You're ruining everything," she screamed, her voice echoing in the small space. I calmly turned away from my laptop, meeting her furious gaze. "You're the one who ruined everything, Sarah. I'm just doing what I need to do to move on." Her reaction was unexpected. Instead of shouting or arguing, she broke down. I had never seen her cry like that before. It was as if the facade she had been holding up for so long shattered right before my eyes. "I didn't think you would actually do this. I thought we could work things out," she sobbed, clinging to the edge of the desk. "Work things out? You had an affair with my student. This isn't something we can just gloss over," I replied, feeling a mix of anger and pity. I had spent so long trying to understand her side, trying to salvage what little was left of our marriage, but I realized that this was not about salvaging, it was about self-respect. "I was lonely, okay? You were always working and I felt abandoned," she said, her voice trembling. "Mark was just someone who paid attention to me." The admission stung. All the times I had tried to connect with her felt wasted, overshadowed by her betrayal. "You could have talked to me, but instead you chose to cheat. I can't forgive that," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. The conversation spiraled into chaos, with Sarah throwing accusations of her own. "You're just doing this to punish me. You're being selfish," she yelled, but I stood my ground. I was no longer that passive guy who would take the blame for everything. As the weeks rolled on, the divorce process became a whirlwind. There were legal documents to sign, meetings with my lawyer, and the constant back and forth with Sarah about dividing our assets. I felt like I was living in a storm, but amidst the chaos, I found solace in my business. I poured my energy into it, and slowly but surely it began to take off. I launched the website and it quickly gained traction. I was building something that was all mine, and it felt incredible. With the business thriving, I started to explore new opportunities. I connected with other entrepreneurs, joined networking groups, and even started offering free webinars to showcase my expertise. The more I engaged with my new community, the more I realized how fulfilling it was to create something impactful. I was transforming my pain into purpose, and it felt empowering. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to spiral. She reached out to me sporadically, trying to persuade me to reconsider the divorce. "We can fix this, Jake. Just give me another chance," she would say, but I had to remind myself of the betrayal every time. I refused to let her manipulate me into feeling guilty for choosing my happiness. One evening, I received a call from my lawyer. "Jake, I have some updates on the divorce proceedings," she said, her voice serious. I felt my heart race as I listened to her outline the next steps. "Sarah has been difficult, but I believe we can reach a settlement soon. I suggest we prepare for mediation." The thought of facing Sarah in mediation brought a wave of anxiety. I had been avoiding her for a while, and now I had to confront her head-on. I knew I would have to stick to my guns, but the thought of seeing her again sent a shiver down my spine. The woman I had loved had become an enemy, and that realization felt bitter. When the day of mediation arrived, I walked into the conference room with a mix of determination and dread. Sarah was already seated, her expression unreadable. I took a deep breath and sat across from her. This was it. This was the moment I had been preparing for. With the mediator guiding the discussion, I felt the tension thick in the air. I had my lawyer by my side, and I knew I had to be firm. As we discussed the division of assets, Sarah tried to play the victim again. "Jake, you're being so harsh. We built a life together," she pleaded, but I didn't waver. "We built a life, but you destroyed it. It's time for us both to move on," I said, my voice steady. What followed was a back and forth that felt draining, but in that room, I recognized a newfound strength within myself. I wasn't the same man who had let her walk all over me. I was determined to carve out my own path, and I wouldn't let her guilt trip me into feeling otherwise. The mediation ended with a tentative agreement, and as I walked out of that room, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. I was one step closer to reclaiming my life, and the weight of the past was starting to lift. The days following the mediation were a mix of relief and uncertainty. It felt surreal to finally have a framework for my new life, Yet there was still a lingering sadness about the end of my marriage. I thought about all the moments we had shared, the dreams we had built together, and how they had all crumbled because of one person's choices. But I also understood that I couldn't dwell on the past. I had to keep moving forward. My business continued to flourish, and every day brought new challenges and opportunities. I began to create online courses that attracted a wide audience of students eager to learn outside the traditional classroom setting. The thrill of watching my ideas come to life fueled my passion like nothing else. I was finally doing something that made me feel fulfilled. As I worked on building my brand, I also started to expand my social circle. I reached out to friends I hadn't spoken to in years, reconnecting with those I had neglected while being consumed by my marriage. I even started dating again, albeit cautiously. The first time I went out with someone new, I felt a rush of excitement and anxiety. Her name was Emily, and she was a fellow entrepreneur. We met at a networking event, and there was an instant connection. It felt strange at first to open up to someone again, but Emily was refreshing. She was kind, supportive, and didn't shy away from my past. In fact, she encouraged me to share my journey, including the messy details of my divorce. I found it cathartic to talk about my experiences, and as I shared, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Emily listened without judgment and offered her own insights about relationships, which helped me see things from a different perspective. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to reach out sporadically, trying to sway me back into her orbit. "I miss what we had, Jake," she would text. "We can fix this if you just give it another chance." Each message felt like a pull back into a past I was desperately trying to escape. I had to remind myself that the Sarah I once loved was gone, replaced by someone who cared more about her own desires than about our life together. One night, after a particularly long day of work, I found myself sitting on my couch, scrolling through old photos on my phone. I stumbled upon a picture of Sarah and me from a vacation we took a couple of years ago. We were laughing, carefree, and genuinely happy. But then I remembered the betrayal, the lies, and how she had thrown it all away. I deleted the picture, realizing that I needed to let go of the idea of what we had. As the weeks passed, my business continued to grow, and my relationship with Emily blossomed. We enjoyed fun outings, shared meals, and engaged in deep conversations. I found myself smiling more than I had in years, and that was a feeling I wanted to chase. However, the reality of my divorce loomed over me. I was still tied to Sarah through the legal process, and each reminder felt like a tether to my past. One day, while I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop, I received a call from my lawyer. "Jake, I wanted to let you know that Sarah is contesting the settlement we reached in mediation," she said, her voice steady but firm. My stomach dropped. "She's unhappy with her portion of the assets and wants to take it to court." I felt a surge of anger. After everything that had happened, she still wanted to play games. It felt like a last-ditch effort to exert control over my life, and I wasn't going to let that happen. "What's the next step?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "We can fight her in court, but it will take time and may end up dragging out the process," my lawyer explained. "You'll need to prepare for a possible trial, and that could get messy." The thought of going back into a courtroom, facing Sarah again, made my stomach churn. But I knew I couldn't back down. This was about more than just money. It was about standing up for myself and my future. After hanging up, I took a moment to collect my thoughts. Instead of letting the news defeat me, I channeled my energy into preparing for what was to come. I started organizing my documents, gathering evidence for the case, and mentally preparing myself for the court proceedings. I would not let Sarah dictate my life any longer. As the court date approached, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I confided in Emily about what was happening, and she offered her unwavering support. "You've come so far, Jake. You deserve to see this through to the end," she said. Her words resonated with me, reminding me of how much I had grown since the beginning of this ordeal. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I found myself sitting in the waiting room, heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was walking into battle, armed with evidence and a newfound resolve. When my name was called, I took a deep breath and walked into the courtroom, ready to face Sarah one last time. As I sat across from her, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The woman I once loved was now a stranger, and I felt a strange sense of closure wash over me. This was my chance to reclaim my life fully, to step out from the shadows of my past, and to finally let go. The hearing was tense, filled with back-and-forth arguments from both sides. Sarah's lawyer tried to paint me as the villain, twisting the narrative to suit her needs. But I stood firm, presenting my case calmly and confidently. I could feel the support from Emily, who waited outside the courtroom, helping me find my center. As the judge deliberated, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. No matter the outcome, I knew I had stood up for myself, and that was a victory in itself. The gavel struck, and the judge returned with a ruling that favored me in most respects. The sense of relief that washed over me was overwhelming. I had finally come out on the other side. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was time to embrace my new life fully, to step into the future that awaited me. I had taken back control, built a successful business, and rediscovered my passion for life. I was ready to write the next chapter, one filled with hope, possibility, and maybe even love again. The ruling from the court marked a significant turning point in my life. It felt like the heavy chains of my past had finally been broken, allowing me to breathe freely for the first time in a long while. I walked out of the courthouse with a sense of triumph, a quiet confidence settling in as I stepped into the sun-soaked street. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready to embrace it. In the weeks that followed the court ruling, I immersed myself in my work. The online educational platform I had built was thriving, and I began to expand my offerings. I started developing additional courses that included topics I was passionate about: critical thinking, personal finance, and even a bit of self-improvement. The response from my audience was overwhelmingly positive, and I felt a sense of fulfillment I hadn't experienced in years. Emily and I continued to explore our relationship. We went on adventures, visited new places, and enjoyed each other's company. With her, I found a sense of ease that I had longed for, and every day spent together felt like a new beginning. We often talked about the future, sharing our aspirations, and it was refreshing to consider what lay ahead without the weight of my past holding me back. Despite the progress I was making, I still had moments where I felt a pang of sadness over my marriage's end. I'd see couples holding hands or sharing laughter, and a part of me would ache for the connection I had once shared with Sarah. But I reminded myself of why I had left that life behind. I was no longer tied to someone who would betray my trust so easily. One evening, as Emily and I were sitting on my porch, sipping wine and enjoying the sunset, I confided in her about my lingering sadness. "Sometimes I think about what could have been, you know," I said, staring out at the horizon. She turned to me, her expression softening. "It's natural to feel that way, Jake. You invested so much of yourself into that relationship. But remember, you took a brave step to choose your happiness. That's what matters now." Her words resonated deeply, and I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the man who would allow himself to be manipulated by someone else's choices. I had reclaimed my life, my happiness, and my purpose. The journey wasn't easy, but it had led me to this moment, and for that I was grateful. As the months passed, the business flourished beyond my expectations. I began to hire a small team to help manage the workload. It felt empowering to build something from the ground up, and it reinforced my belief in myself. I didn't just survive, I thrived. One day, while working at my desk, I received an unexpected email. It was from Sarah. My heart raced as I opened it, hesitant about what it might say. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" The email was filled with apologies, regret, and a request for a chance to explain herself. "I've reflected on everything, and I want to take responsibility for my actions," she wrote. "I understand if you never want to speak to me again, but I hope we can at least have a conversation." I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of emotions. Part of me was furious at her audacity to reach out after everything that had happened. Another part of me felt a strange sense of closure. Here was the person who had hurt me deeply, reaching out to take responsibility. But did I want to hear her out? I spent days wrestling with whether or not to respond. Emily encouraged me to do whatever felt right. Only you can decide if you want that conversation, she said. But remember, you've come so far already. Don't feel pressured to open old wounds if you don't want to. After some contemplation, I decided to respond. I agreed to meet her at a local cafe, but I set clear boundaries. I'm open to talking, but this is not about rekindling anything. I've moved on and I want to keep it that way. The day of our meeting arrived, and as I walked into the cafe, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. I spotted Sarah sitting at a table, fidgeting with her coffee cup. She looked different, more subdued and less confident than I remembered. "Jake," she greeted me, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded and took a seat across from her, feeling the weight of the past settle between us like a thick fog. "So, what did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath and began to explain herself. "I know I hurt you deeply," she started, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was selfish and made terrible choices. I never appreciated what I had until I lost it. I've spent the last few months trying to understand why I did what I did, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." As she spoke, I felt a mix of emotions stirring within me. I had spent so long feeling anger and betrayal, yet here she was, taking responsibility. "It's taken you a long time to realize this," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "I had to pick up the pieces of my life on my own. I built a new future without you." "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just needed to say it. I've been working on myself, seeing a therapist, trying to understand my actions. I'm not asking for anything from you, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." Her sincerity caught me off guard, and I found myself reconsidering my feelings. I didn't want to carry this anger forever, but I also didn't want to fall back into old habits. "I appreciate your apology, Sarah," I said slowly. "But I've moved on. I hope you can do the same." We talked for a while longer, and I shared a bit about my business and how I had been rebuilding my life. I could see a flicker of pride in her eyes, and for the first time I felt a sense of closure. This conversation was not about rekindling our past. It was about acknowledging the hurt and moving forward. As we finished our coffee, I felt lighter. I had taken a step towards closure, validating my feelings while also allowing her to express hers. We parted ways amicably, and I walked away from that cafe feeling a renewed sense of freedom. In the months that followed, I continued to flourish both professionally and personally. Emily and I grew closer, embarking on new adventures and exploring life together. I learned to cherish each moment, embracing the present rather than dwelling on the past. My business thrived, and I found joy in every step of the journey. I had emerged from the ashes of my old life, stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. I had turned my pain into purpose, and for that I was grateful. Life was a beautiful mess, and I was finally living it on my terms. With each passing day, the weight of my past continued to lift, and I embraced the new normal that had emerged from the wreckage of my marriage. The journey I had undertaken taught me invaluable lessons about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of pursuing my passions. Emily and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. We shared laughter, dreams, and mutual support. I watched as my business blossomed into something I had always envisioned, an interactive platform that inspired hundreds of students to learn and grow outside traditional classrooms. The joy of knowing that I was making a difference fueled my drive even more. I was no longer the man tethered to a toxic past. I was a man on a mission. As the holidays approached, I reflected on how far I had come. The transformation felt profound. The shy, heartbroken husband had evolved into a confident entrepreneur and a man who had reclaimed his identity. I spent Thanksgiving with Emily and her family, and it was a refreshing change from the strained gatherings I had with Sarah. There were no undercurrents of tension, just genuine warmth and connection. That season also brought me the opportunity to reconnect with my own family. I made a point to visit my parents, who had been worried about me during the tumultuous times. When I walked into their home, I was greeted with hugs and smiles. They could see the change in me, and it felt good to be surrounded by their love. As the new year approached, I decided to take stock of my life. I wrote down my goals for the coming year, fueling my ambitions with the knowledge that I could achieve anything I set my mind to. I wanted to expand my business reach, develop new courses, and perhaps even consider writing a book about my experiences. It was during this time of reflection that I began to think about the lessons I had learned through my tumultuous journey. If there was one thing I could share with others who found themselves in similar situations, it was this: never underestimate your strength. When life knocks you down, you have the power to rise again. You're not defined by your past or by the actions of others. You are the author of your own story, and it's okay to rewrite the narrative. One evening, as Emily and I sat by the fireplace, I shared my thoughts with her. "I've learned so much about myself this past year," I said, the warmth of the fire mirroring the warmth in my heart. "I feel like I finally understand what I want in life, and it's not just about success, it's about happiness, connection, and living authentically." She smiled, her eyes sparkling. "I've seen how far you've come, Jake. It's inspiring. You've turned your pain into something so beautiful, and it's a testament to your strength." We toasted to the new year, and as the clock struck midnight, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. I was ready to embrace new challenges, new adventures, and new opportunities. I had learned to let go of the past, to forgive, not for Sarah's sake, but for my own peace of mind. As the months rolled on, my business continued to grow, and I found myself filled with gratitude for the journey I had taken. I also knew that the road ahead would not always be smooth. Life has its ups and downs, but I now had the tools to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. I made a commitment to stay connected with my emotions, to foster my relationships, and to keep pursuing my dreams. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, who appreciated me for who I was, and who inspired me to become a better version of myself. One day, while reflecting on my journey, I penned a letter to my future self. In it, I wrote about the importance of staying true to my values, cherishing the relationships I had built, and never losing sight of the lessons learned through hardship. I wanted to remind myself that the challenges I had faced were not just obstacles, but stepping stones to something greater. With every passing day, I felt a deeper sense of purpose, a clarity that had been clouded for so long. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was a man who had transformed his pain into purpose. I had learned to love again, not just in the romantic sense, but in the way I approached life and my work. As I sat in my office one evening, surrounded by the glow of my computer screen and the soft hum of my business thriving, I smiled at the reflection staring back at me. Jake, the husband who had been betrayed, had become Jake, the entrepreneur and passionate advocate for education. I had emerged from the darkness into the light. I knew that no matter what challenges awaited me, I was ready to face them head-on. I had learned that life is a series of choices, and I was choosing to embrace every moment, to live authentically, and to strive for happiness. This was my life, my journey, and I was determined to make it extraordinary.